The teachings of Muhammad and the principles outlined in the Quran form a complex and interconnected system of faith, ethics, and social justice. By analyzing these teachings through the lens of logical triads, we can better understand how various elements of Islamic belief and practice reinforce and influence one another. This analysis uses a structured approach to examine how different concepts in Islam align with patterns of coexistence, reinforcement, causality, and integration, among others. By integrating scriptural support from the Quran, we provide a comprehensive view of how these triads manifest in the teachings of Muhammad, revealing the depth and coherence of Islamic principles. Coexistence is a foundational concept in the Ummah, the Islamic community. The concept of the Ummah represents a unified community where believers coexist harmoniously. The Quranic support for this comes from Surah Al-Imran, which states, "And hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided." This verse emphasizes the importance of unity and mutual support among believers, reflecting the interconnected coexistence within the community. Equilibrium is another crucial aspect, particularly in the context of social justice. Islam emphasizes social justice, where the absence of justice impacts the entire community. Quranic support can be found in Surah An-Nisa, which instructs, "O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives." This verse calls for an unwavering commitment to justice, highlighting how its absence affects the community's balance and harmony. Reinforcement is a key concept when discussing the 5 pillars of Islam. The 5 pillars reinforce each other, guiding a Muslim's life. The Quran supports this interconnection in Surah Al-Baqarah, stating, "And establish prayer and give zakah and bow with those who bow." The practice of prayer and charity reinforces other pillars like fasting and pilgrimage, creating a cycle of reinforcing faith and actions. Let's delve into the concept of sin and repentance. Neglecting one's duties can significantly weaken one's faith, leading to a moral decline. The Quran teaches us, indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. From Surah Ar-Ra'd, chapter 13, verse 11. This verse suggests a feedback loop where neglecting duties leads to spiritual and moral deterioration, which then perpetuates further neglect. Moving on to prophethood and guidance. The prophethood of Muhammad is pivotal as it leads to the revelation of the Quran, which in turn guides the believers. The Quran states, "We have sent among you a messenger of your own, reciting to you our verses, and purifying you and teaching you the book and wisdom and teaching you that which you did not know." This is from Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 151. Here the verse illustrates the causal relationship where the prophet brings the Quran, providing essential guidance. Without the prophet, this guidance would be absent. Lastly, let's discuss moral accountability. The absence of moral actions leads to a lack of faith, and the absence of divine guidance results in moral decline. The Quran warns, "And whoever turns away from my remembrance, indeed, he will have a depressed life, and we will gather him on the day of resurrection blind." This is from Surah Taha, chapter 20, verse 124. Turning away from divine guidance leads to a lack of moral actions and faith, whereas adherence to guidance fosters faith and morality. Let's delve into the concept of spiritual growth. It begins with initial faith, which ultimately leads to a spiritual reward. This reward, in turn, enhances moral behavior. As the Quran states, "Whoever does righteousness, whether male or female, while he is a believer, we will surely cause him to live a good life, and we will surely give them their reward according to the best of what they used to do." From Surah An-Nahl 16:97. This verse beautifully supports the idea that faith leads to spiritual reward, which then encourages moral actions. Now, let's explore the concept of the Day of Judgment. The absence of belief in this day leads to a lack of faith, and consequently, immoral behavior results from disbelief in the afterlife. The Quran warns, "And those who disbelieve in our signs, we will progressively lead them to destruction from where they do not know." From Surah Al-Araf 7:182. Disbelief in the afterlife leads to a lack of faith and moral decay. Conversely, belief in the afterlife reinforces faith and moral conduct. Turning our focus to community and worship, faith encourages community worship, which in turn leads to personal spiritual benefits. This reinforces both individual faith and community worship. The Quran instructs, "The mosques of Allah are only to be maintained by those who believe in Allah and the Last Day, and establish prayer and give zakah and do not fear except Allah." From Surah At-Tawbah 9:18. This shows that belief in Allah leads to maintaining places of worship, which benefits both the community and individual spirituality, thus creating a reinforcing cycle. Today, we delve into the concept of excommunication. Excluding someone from the community can significantly weaken their faith. When individuals lack faith and community support, it often results in moral decline. The Quran addresses this issue, stating, "And those who disbelieved said to their messengers, 'We will surely drive you out of our land, or you must return to our religion.' So their Lord inspired to them, 'We will surely destroy the wrongdoers.'" Surah Ibrahim 14:13. This illustrates how excommunication, or B, leads to weakened faith, A, and combined, these lead to moral and spiritual decay, C. Moving on to Sharia, or Islamic law. Adhering to Islamic law is not just about legal rules, it's about nurturing faith and ensuring social justice. Faith promotes adherence to the law, while social justice ensures the law's relevance and observance. The Quran supports this with the verse, "Indeed, this Quran guides to that which is most suitable and gives good tidings to the believers who do righteous deeds that they will have a great reward." Surah Al-Isra 17:9. Thus, following Islamic law, B, leads to faith, A, and social justice, C, both of which further reinforce adherence to the law, B. Lastly, let's talk about the neglect of duties. Neglecting spiritual duties and social justice can lead to a breakdown in societal norms. This often results in weakened faith and further injustice. The Quran warns, "And those who, when reminded of the verses of their Lord, do not fall upon them deaf and blind." Surah Al-Furqan 25:73. This passage highlights how neglecting spiritual duties, A, and justice, C, leads to the breakdown of societal norms and further neglect of duties, B. In the realm of Islamic teachings, the concept of charity and community welfare holds a significant place. Combining faith and charitable actions results in community welfare. Faith and community welfare encourage more charitable actions, and charity and welfare strengthen faith. The Quran beautifully illustrates this synergy with the verse, "The example of those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah is like a seed that sprouts 7 ears. In every ear there are 100 grains, and Allah multiplies for whom He wills." Surah Al-Baqarah 2:261. This insight tells us that faith, represented as A, combined with charity, B, leads to community welfare, C, and each element strengthens the others. Turning our attention to the darker aspects, the concept of corruption and disunity emerges when community welfare is absent. This absence leads to a lack of faith and charitable actions. A lack of charity results in weakened faith and disunity, and loss of faith leads to corruption and social injustice. The Quran warns us of these dangers with the verse, "Corruption has appeared throughout the land and sea, by what the hands of people have earned, so He may let them taste part of what they have done, that perhaps they will return." Surah Ar-Rum 30:41. The insight here is quite profound. Lack of welfare, C, leads to lack of faith, A, and charity, B, perpetuating a cycle of corruption and disunity. Now, let us explore the concept of holistic worship. In Islam, faith leads to both worship and social justice. Worship leads to faith and justice promotes both faith and worship. This holistic approach is encapsulated in the Quranic verse, "Say, indeed, my prayer, my rites of sacrifice, my living and my dying are for Allah, Lord of the worlds." Surah Al-An'am 6:162. This verse underscores that faith, A, leads to worship, B, and justice, C, and each of these elements mutually reinforces the others. The concept of isolation and decay is deeply intertwined with the spiritual health of a society. The absence of worship and justice leads to a loss of faith. When faith and justice are absent, worship ceases, and this lack of worship and faith results in societal decay. The Quran warns, "And those who disbelieve say, Do not listen to this Quran and speak noisily during it, that perhaps you will overcome. Surah Fussilat 41:26. This highlights how the absence of worship, denoted as B, and justice, C, leads to a loss of faith, A, creating a cycle of moral and social decay. The concept of jihad, or striving for good, emphasizes the balance between personal effort and community welfare. Personal striving without public charity can be justified by social justice. Meanwhile, public charity without social justice can still be justified by personal faith, and social justice without personal faith can be justified by public charity. The Quran supports this with the verse, "And strive for Allah with the striving due to Him. He has chosen you and has not placed upon you in the religion any difficulty." Surah Al-Hajj 22:78. Here, striving for good, A, without public charity, a B, can be justified by social justice, C, emphasizing the need for a balanced approach to personal and communal obligations. Hypocrisy is a critical issue addressed within the Quran. Lack of personal faith with public charity results in hidden injustice. Public charity without social justice reveals a lack of faith, and social justice without personal faith uncovers a lack of true charity. The Quran states, "O you who have believed, why do you say what you do not do? Great is hatred in the sight of Allah that you say what you do not do." Surah As-Saf, February 3, 61. This illustrates how lack of faith, A, with public charity, B, leads to hidden injustice, C, highlighting the dangers and moral pitfalls of hypocrisy. Today we delve into the concept of community service. Community service, even without personal faith, can still be motivated by social justice. Likewise, service that lacks a social justice angle can still be driven by pure faith. When we combine both faith and justice, it naturally leads to community service. The Quran supports this with the verse, "And cooperate in righteousness and piety, but do not cooperate in sin and aggression, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is severe in penalty." This is from Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 2. This insight teaches us that community service can be driven by justice even without faith, showcasing the interdependence of faith, justice, and service. Let's delve into the concept of apathy. Lack of service, despite personal faith, results in societal neglect. Similarly, lack of service despite social justice indicates a decline in faith. Essentially, an absence of service leads to the absence of both faith and justice. The Quran supports this with a verse from Surah Al-Baqarah. "Those who do not believe in the hereafter are in ill conduct, while whoever believes in Allah and the last day does righteousness." This insight shows us that lack of community service, despite faith or justice, leads to societal neglect and moral decay. Moving on to comprehensive ethics, where faith leads to ethical behavior unless it is obstructed by lack of justice. Justice too leads to ethics unless it is obstructed by lack of faith. Combining both faith and justice naturally promotes ethical behavior. The Quran highlights this, stating, "Indeed, Allah orders justice and good conduct and giving to relatives, and forbids immorality and bad conduct and oppression." He admonishes you that perhaps you will be reminded. This tells us that faith and justice together promote ethical behavior, reinforcing the comprehensive ethical system in Islam. Now, let's consider moral decay. Lack of ethical behavior leads to a loss of faith unless it is upheld by justice. Lack of ethics leads to injustice unless it is upheld by faith. The absence of ethical behavior leads to both loss of faith and societal injustice. The Quran illustrates this with, "So because of what they said, Allah rewarded them with gardens beneath which rivers flow, wherein they abide eternally. And that is the reward of doers of good." This underscores that the absence of ethical behavior leads to loss of faith and justice, highlighting the importance of maintaining ethical standards to preserve faith and justice. Through the structured analysis of the teachings of Muhammad, framed within logical triads and supported by Quranic verses, we uncover a profound interconnectedness in Islamic doctrine. This approach reveals how faith, worship, social justice, and moral conduct are not isolated concepts, but rather interdependent elements that reinforce and sustain one another. Each triad demonstrates how the presence or absence of one aspect influences the others, highlighting the holistic nature of Islamic teachings. For instance, the emphasis on unity within the Ummah underscores the importance of coexistence, where the strength of the community is tied to the mutual support of its members. The 5 pillars of Islam exemplify the reinforcement of faith through structured practices, while principles of social justice and ethical behavior illustrate the dynamic feedback loops essential for maintaining moral and spiritual equilibrium. Moreover, this analysis reveals how neglect in one area, such as spiritual duties or community service, can lead to broader societal and moral decay, emphasizing the necessity of a balanced and comprehensive adherence to Islamic principles. Conversely, the integration of faith and justice naturally fosters ethical behavior, promoting a virtuous cycle that benefits both individuals and society as a whole. In conclusion, by exploring the teachings of Muhammad through logical triads and Quranic support, we gain a deeper understanding of the intrinsic harmony and interdependence within Islamic teachings. This method not only clarifies the relationships among various aspects of the faith, but also reinforces the timeless relevance and wisdom embedded in the Quran and the Prophet's teachings, guiding believers towards a balanced and righteous life.